guys, how are you? I've decided to make this video about the deadlift technique just to show you guys how exactly to perform the deadlift, because it's probably the exercise most people have problems with. So I'm going to go through with you the exact breakdown in the series that you would set it up, and then go through maybe some of the main mistakes that you guys might make as well. Okay, just before we start, like, the deadlift is a hinge exercise. Okay, so when we're hinging, we really want to load up the glutes and the hamstrings, and that's the main muscles that this exercise is going to work. But it is known as one of the best exercises because of the fact that it trains probably every single muscle right from the bottom of your ankle up to the base of your neck. Okay, so there's no muscle that's not working when you're deadlifting, so everything needs to work in sync. But there are some muscles that are going to work more than others, and that's going to be your glutes, your hamstrings, and your lower back. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in the first point of the setting up for the deadlift is to determine the width or stance of your feet. This is going to be individual for everyone, based on different limb lengths, and based on different body type. Okay, so someone that's a little bit taller is going to look, or is going to have a deadlift that looks a little bit different than someone who's a little bit shorter. Okay, but as a rule of thumb, what you're going to do is take your deadlift stance where you would jump up and land. Okay, so here's an example. Jump up, wherever you land. For most people, it's going to be roughly with their feet right directly underneath their hip bones. So hip bones, draw the line down, and that's going to be most people's deadlift stance. Okay, the next thing to determine is how far or how close we come into the bar when setting up. And again, as a rule of thumb, because it's going to be a little bit different for everybody, longer people or people that are taller will start probably a little bit further away from the bar, and people who have a little bit better mobility and are shorter can start with their shins a little bit closer into the bar. But as a general rule of thumb, everyone wants to be starting about an inch or two from the shins to the bar, which is going to leave you roughly over maybe mid-foot to a little bit back towards the shoelace, or your knot on your shoelace. So you come over here for a second. I'm going to grab that camera. Okay, so first thing we got to do is we got to set our deadlift stance up. So roughly wherever you jump or underneath your hips, and then the distance away from the bar is going to be roughly over the lace in your shoe, or sorry, the knot in your shoe, which is roughly there, an inch or two away from your shins. Okay, so the main mistakes most people make are setting up a little bit too far away here. Okay, and then again, same thing can be made when you set up too close. Okay, so we're roughly looking maybe mid-foot, maybe just over the shoelace. It's going to be individual. Once you've got your stance set up, the next thing you got to do is brace yourself. This is the same sequence in every other exercise that you'll be doing in the gym. The bracing process starts squeezing your backside to push your hips into neutral. The next part is bracing your stomach, like you're going to get a whack in the belly. Okay, so we're getting tight from here, we're getting tight from here, and then what you got to do is screw your hips in to the ground and screw your arms in, or screw your shoulders in nice and tight. Okay, so feet distance. Squeeze your butt, squeeze your stomach, screw your feet in, screw your shoulders back. Okay, and now you're ready to start the deadlift. What we're going to do now is start getting into the starting position, and we're going to do that by shooting our hips to the back wall, but keep the weight over the middle of your foot. So try not to sit back onto your heels that you want to fall over. Keep the weight centered over the midfoot. Get tight, get tight, get tight. Hips come back into position, and that's going to be your deadlift starting position. The main mistakes people are making with regards to this starting point here is starting with their hips either too low, which will make it quite taxing on your lower back to lift it, and then not as much with your hips high will make a mistake, but more so with a rounded posture. So here's the first of the two main mistakes. It's starting too low with the hips. Okay, you're not going to get enough activation in your glutes and your hamstrings as if you would push them back rather than down. So when you've got your stance set up, you get yourself tight, you screw the hips in, the shoulders in. I want you to shift your hips backwards rather than downwards. Okay, so you can really feel the back of your legs already working before you even engage in pulling this weight. The other mistake most people will make, and it might come down to maybe a lack of mobility, but if I give you the all clear to give your mobility or to give this exercise a go, well then your mobility is fine to do it. So just be wary of hips starting too high, which might enable you to end up coming into this rounded position, like this. Okay, so that's not hinging back enough and kind of making up the distance with your back to get down to the bar, rather than making up the distance by pushing this fella here to the back wall. Okay, so keep practicing. That's your hinge, and it's going to really load these fellas up here. Okay, so once we're in the starting position, we're almost ready to pull. All you need to do now is get your shoulders in a little bit tighter. So we're going to start engaging the bar using our lats here. Same muscles we use when we bench press on the descent, on the way down. We try and break the bar in half to get these muscles in nice and tight. The same when we squat, the bar on our back. We try and pull the bar around our back to engage the lats. Okay, so these are super important and they work across all three of the main lifts: your squat, your bench and your deadlift here that I'm going to show you. Okay, so engaged, I'm pulling the bar around me, and what you'll probably notice is that my shirt actually comes into a little bit of a crinkle, and that's one of the things that I'm looking out for, to make sure that you guys are engaged in your lats. And it's going to keep your shoulders really safe, and it's also going to stop you rounded in your upper back like that when you pull. So you've got to keep them nice and tight in all the time. No engagement in the lats will look like this. Okay? Not so much rounding from the upper back or the lower back, but more so rounding from the upper back, and the arms will start to elongate because you don't have them tucked in. The next thing, really important thing, and this is actually where most people go wrong. So once you got your setup right at the start, that's probably the easy part, but the trick with the deadlift is keeping the same bar part continually. Okay, so you must have this bar following the same path, or imagine that it's on a set of train tracks and it cannot deviate. Once this bar starts deviating, especially on the way down for most people, well, that's when you're going to start bringing the bar further away, and it's going to be harder to actually lift, okay? Because it's going to be harder when I pull it from here compared to here. The weight gets heavier the further away it gets. So you just got to start practicing this as much as you can, even with the empty barbell and the warm-up. Practice with the lighter weights and the medium weights, that it's not just all about the heavier weights. So practice on keeping this bar really, really close to your shins. Can you see this from the side? Bar path. Squeeze your butt, lock it out at the top, and then when you're coming back down, sit your hips back so the bar follows the exact same path down to the start, and now it's in the exact same position as I started in the first place, not further away from it. Okay, so the biggest mistake is pulling it up nice and tight, but letting it come back a little bit loose. Maybe because you're coming back with your knees forward like this instead of your hips back like that. Or else maybe you're just not concentrating enough and it's getting a little bit too far away from you. So a bad bar path deadlift, which will be tougher on your lower back, will look something like this. Okay, so each time it's getting further and further and further away, and then you wonder why the first one is easy, the second one is starting to get a little bit hard, and by the time you get to the fifth one, it's really difficult to maintain your position. It is because you're after doing the weight already, and it's your 5th rep. The last one's always going to be the hardest, but it shouldn't be so much heavier than the first one, unless it is starting to get away from you, then it will become even heavier to pull. The last thing then is just making sure that you're breathing properly. You're going to brace yourself down the bottom of the deadlift just before you actually lift it. Down into your lower back, 360 degrees pressure in your stomach. So when we're going through the deadlift, always have yourself set up in a routine that you do the same thing continually, and it's not a different setup each time. So setup looks like, for myself, feet, distance, squeeze your butt, squeeze my stomach, screw my shoulders in, screw my feet in, hips back, arms in. I tuck the bar in tight so I'm engaging the lats, then I take a big breath down right into my lower back, and then I think about pushing the floor down into the ground and pushing my back up towards the roof. Big breath in, squeeze your butt, big breath in, okay, they're pretty much the main things. Main mistakes are hips starting too low probably, hips maybe starting too high, that you're in this little bit of a rounded position. And then the main one that you really got to practice on is following that bar path nice and smooth. So this should feel like a really smooth lift instead of a really grinding type of a lift where it keeps getting further in and further out away from you. Okay, hope this video helps. I'll have a few more to come.